Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 146 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. So, as some of you know, at least some of you followed me on the social network world of Facebook or Twitter or what have you, I was fortunate to spend my last fall teaching for a study abroad program. Study abroad students from an American university or students from actually several American universities studying abroad in Cortona, Tuscany. This is an amazing program from the University of Georgia, the University of Georgia's Study Abroad program, and I'll link to that program in the cameraposition.com blog page and as well as in the PDF in the app. But this program was really interesting because I was, of course, teaching photography to a small group of students. And it was really a wonderful experience. And most all of these students, with one exception, were more or less complete beginners in photography. They had DSLR cameras, and really most of them had just gotten their DSLR cameras and were learning how to use the camera, but also learning how to think about photography. And so this small group of students, Anna, Coral, Iris, Jenna, Joanne, Lizzie, Suha, and Kylie, were my students for a full semester living and working in Cortona, Tuscany, a wonderful, beautiful hill town in sort of southeastern Tuscany. And really an interesting experience for me. First of all, longtime teacher of photography, of course, but rarely do I get the chance to teach such a wonderfully small group of students and very dedicated students. Each one of these students was really dedicated to the idea of learning photography. Now, photography wasn't the only course they were taking at the time. Of course, they were taking other courses in other disciplines, other artistic disciplines, as well as art history courses, and some of them taking some courses in classics and so forth and so on, Italian culture, Italian language. But what was really interesting to me was the way in which these students approached photography. And at first, of course, as many people do, they approached it kind of tentatively. But what happened was, after about the third week of engaging photography, both learning about the technology behind photography, but also thinking about the visual aspects of photography, they reached what I call escape velocity. Escape velocity. So their first few steps in photography were sort of tentative. They pointed the camera at something and took a picture of it and somehow expected that photograph would replicate the experience of standing in front of that thing and making a picture of it and looking at it. And then they began slowly to realize that wasn't the case, that what they needed to do was think about how the photograph is different from the visual experience of standing there in the world and looking at something. And what I discovered was that their positive experience, what happened with all of them, was that they all became quite good photographers by the end of the semester. But their positive experience was based on really kind of four things. Time spent on task. They actually put in a lot of time photographing and a lot of time in post-production. They were primarily working in digital photography, working in Lightroom and a little bit of Photoshop. So time in being out in the field and photographing, sometimes with me, sometimes on their own. So time was a really important concept or a really important component of what they did. And concentration on the idea of studying photography. And of course, it didn't hurt that they were also all studying some other form of art or art history. And of course, we were making field trips as a school group, as the University of Georgia Study Abroad program. We were making field trips to amazing places with amazing art, and they were seeing a lot of different visual things. So they were concentrating on the idea of communicating concepts visually. So time and concentration, and then craft. craft was another important thing. And one of the things that they discovered rather quickly was that in order to say something important, they needed to be able to say something at all. So having the language of photography tucked firmly under their belts was an important component of understanding how to do photography. And then, of course, lastly, the thing that they discovered was idea. That the idea behind a photograph, the concept behind a photograph, is perhaps the most important thing. And that what they began to realize after a few short weeks, what they began to realize was that it wasn't enough to just point the camera at something that they found interesting, but to convey some sense of idea about what it was that this thing meant to them. And those things put together, time, concentration, craft, and idea, began to help them learn about the way photography was different from the other forms of art that they were practicing, of drawing and painting and sculpture and ceramics and so forth, but also that they could express themselves through the camera, and that it wasn't just making a photograph of the thing in front of themselves, the thing in front of the camera, but rather expressing some notion about what they felt about that and how it worked through the camera's lens. So I wanted to share those ideas with you and share the concept of escape velocity and the idea that in almost every case, every time I've taught photography, every time I've done something in or around or surrounding photography, after those few first tentative steps, at some point after some basis of time, concentration, craft, and idea, I reach escape velocity. Students reach escape velocity. Photographers reach escape velocity and can really fly, really move forward in the medium. So I'll share with you some photographs by these great young photographers and put them on the blog page as well as in the app, in the PDF app, and take a look at what they are. And I will also, we did a lot of work with Flickr, and I'll sort of I'll link you up to their Flickr pages as well, so you can look at more work from them. And take a look and maybe comment on their Flickr site and let them know what you think about these first beginning steps in photography. And I hope you'll notice that, especially if you look at their Flickr sites, what you'll see is photographers' first tentative steps and then much more mature work after the concentration on time, concentration of effort, craft, and idea. So see what you can do to reach escape velocity. Even if you've been photographing for a long time, think of some new idea. Make those tentative steps with that new piece of technology, the new method that you're using of perhaps putting together images and sound, or images in narrative format in a book, or some of the other ideas we've talked about with camera position, and then see what you can do to concentrate on time, concentrate on idea, concentrate on craft, and reach that escape velocity for yourself. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.